In the bustling town of Ilé-Oro, where the sun loved to kiss the red earth and the markets sang with voices, lived the richest man anyone had ever known, Chief Adewale Ajani. His compound stretched like a small village, with tall walls, carved gates, and guards who wore bright wrappers and carried shining spears. Inside, there were rooms he had never entered, chests of gold he had never counted, and fine clothes he had never bothered to wear. When the people spoke of him, they called him Baba Wura, Father of Gold. They told stories of his generosity, how he paid for wells, repaired roads, and sponsored festivals. Children pointed at his balcony when they passed and whispered, "That is where happiness lives." Yet behind the carved doors and silk curtains, Chief Adewale sat alone more often than not. His meals were served on plates of silver, but he had no one to argue with about the last piece of meat. His laughter hardly ever escaped his throat. It was as if his chest remembered how to sigh but had forgotten how to laugh. At night, the compound grew so quiet that the chirping of crickets sounded like drums. He would lie awake and listen to the distant noise of the town, drums, flutes, and the joyful cries of people playing under the moon. And he would ask himself, "If I have everything, why does my heart feel so empty?" One Harmattan evening, when the wind carried dust and the sky glowed orange, Chief Adewale stood on his high balcony and looked toward the town. From that height, Ilé-Oro looked like a calabash filled with life, tiny figures moving around, the soft smoke of cooking fires rising, and the distant sound of talking and laughter. The chief watched children chasing each other, women calling out prices in the market, and old men sitting under a big mango tree, playing the Io game. Their laughter drifted up to him, warm and alive, and for a moment he felt like a stranger looking into someone else's happiness. That night there was a small festival in the town square, not one he had sponsored or organized, just a simple celebration of the new yam harvest. From his balcony, he could see lamps flickering like stars brought down to earth. He heard singing, rough, untrained voices, but full of joy and the steady beat of a drum. He watched a group of young men dancing in dusty sandals and torn shirts, laughing so loudly that even the night seemed to laugh with them. Chief Adewale felt a pinch in his chest, a strange ache. How can people who have so little laugh so freely, he wondered, while I, with all my riches, sit here like a carved statue? The next morning, the chief called his most trusted servant, Baba Tund, to his private courtyard. The old servant bowed low, wondering what great decision or business matter awaited him. "Baba Tund," Chief Adewale began, packing slowly, "tell me honestly, what do the people think of me?" The old man smiled. "My chief, they say you are blessed beyond measure. They say your life is as sweet as ripe mango. They say you must be the happiest man in all of Ilé-Oro." Chief Adewale stopped walking, his eyes clouded. "They think I am happy," he murmured, "but they do not know my heart." For many days after, the chief could not chase away his thoughts. Whenever he ate, he remembered the laughter of the boys in torn shirts. Whenever he walked past his treasure room, he saw the faces of market women smiling over simple bowls of food. One afternoon, as he sat beneath a shade tree in his compound, listening to the dull sound of his own loneliness, a wild idea came to him, so wild he almost laughed out loud. What if I left these walls and went among my people, not as Chief Adewale Ajani, but as a nobody? What if I could see with my own eyes how they live, how they laugh? His heart beat faster. The idea frightened him, yet it pulled at him like a strong river current. At last, he whispered, "Yes, I will become a beggar." To carry out his plan, Chief Adewale needed a disguise that no one could see through. That evening he sent for Alabi, the palace tailor, a man whose hands had sewn clothes for chiefs, brides, and even masquerades. "Alabi," the chief said in a low voice, "I need clothes that no one will admire, clothes that will make people look past me as if I am dust on the road." The tailor blinked in surprise. He had expected a request for new brocade, not rags. "My chief, I do not understand," he stammered. "You do not need to," Adewale replied gently. "Just bring me old, torn garments, the kind even a poor man might throw away." Within days, Alabi returned with a bundle of faded wrappers, a threadbare shirt, and a cap that looked as if it had wrestled with many rainy seasons. Chief Adewale dismissed his servants and dressed himself slowly, each layer of rough cloth covering another piece of his bright wealth. He rubbed ash on his face to dull his skin and tied an old cloth around his head. When he looked into the polished brass mirror, Even he did not recognize himself. Gone was Baba Wura, the shining chief. In his place stood a tired, thin-looking stranger with sad eyes and cracked lips. He picked up a small calabash to serve as his begging bowl, drew a deep breath, and whispered, "From today, I am no longer Chief Adewale Ajani. I am just a beggar on the streets of Ilé-Oro." At dawn, while his compound still slept, the disguised chief slipped through a small side gate, one usually used by servants. The air outside felt different, cooler, freer, and strangely sharp against his skin. For the first time in many years, he walked the streets with sand under his bare feet and no guards by his side. The town he had always viewed from a distance now rose around him in real size and smell: fresh bread from the bakers, smoke from cooking fires, and the sharp scent of fish in the market. People brushed past him, busy and distracted. No one bowed. No one greeted him with respect. To them, he was just another man struggling to survive. He sat near the market entrance and placed his calabash in front of him. At first, he felt foolish. His heart pounded as if he were doing something shameful. A woman carrying firewood glanced at him quickly and looked away. Two boys rushed past, nearly knocking over his bowl, not even bothering to apologize. Hours crawled by. A few coins clinked into the calabash, given without a second look. For the first time, Chief Adewale tasted the bitterness of being invisible. Yet as he watched the movement of the market, the jokes shared, the greetings exchanged, the teasing between sellers and buyers, he noticed something else. Even with their worry and sweat, people found reasons to smile. A tomato seller laughed loudly when a goat tried to steal one of her fruits. A fishmonger clapped her hands in rhythm as she called out prices like a song. "Is this how life feels outside my walls?" he wondered. Hard, but full of small joys. As the sun climbed high and his stomach began to grumble, a small boy approached him. Barefoot and dusty, but with bright eyes. "Baba," the boy said, "have you eaten today?" Chief Adewale, still playing his role, shook his head. The boy frowned and disappeared into a nearby compound with a broken wooden door hanging sideways. A few moments later, he returned with a small bowl of steaming pap and a piece of roasted plantain. "My mother said you should eat," the boy announced proudly. "We don't have meat today, but this will make your stomach calm." The chief's throat tightened. Here he was, a man who could buy 100 cows at once, being fed by those who had almost nothing. He followed the boy to the compound to thank the family. Inside, he saw a woman with tired eyes but a soft smile, stirring a pot over a 3-stone fire. Her wrapper was worn, and the roof leaked in one corner, but the atmosphere was warm. Two younger children played with a homemade toy fashioned from sticks and an old wheel. "Sit, Baba," the woman said, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "Eat and bless us with your prayer." As he ate, the children talked freely, telling stories and laughing at each other's jokes. Their laughter was not polite or forced. It tumbled out of them like water from a full calabash. Listening to them, Chief Adewale realized something strange. His own grand dining hall, with its silver plates and fine chairs, had never felt this alive. In the following days, the wealthy beggar returned again and again to the market, sitting in different corners, watching and learning. He listened to women bargaining over yam prices, their voices rising and falling like music. He watched apprentices run errands, shouting greetings to friends. One morning, he sat near Mama Enkem, a pepper seller known for her sharp tongue and quick wit. She noticed him eyeing her peppers hungrily and laughed. "Old man, if you keep staring at my pepper like that, it will start blushing," she joked. People around her burst into laughter, and even Chief Adewale could not help smiling. Intrigued by his gentle eyes, Mama Enkem offered him a small handful of pepper and a piece of boiled yam. "Eat, Baba," she said. "Your bones look like they have forgotten what food is." As he chewed slowly, he listened to her chatter. She complained about the rising cost of transport, scolded a lazy apprentice, and then turned to laugh with her neighbor about a stubborn goat that refused to be sold. Life here was not easy. He could see the worry lines on their faces, the tiredness in their shoulders. But between their struggles, they made room for laughter, teasing, and songs. "Owonai kai I cute ra y letter 1 ecd grav," Mama Enkem said at one point. "Money does not buy joy." The disguised chief almost choked on his yam. That proverb struck his heart like a spear. He had always assumed that with enough wealth, everything else would follow. But here, he sat among people who had little money and yet somehow carried a richness he did not understand. One evening, as the sky melted into purple and the market slowly emptied, Chief Adewale wandered toward the big mango tree near the outskirts of Ilé-Oro. There, he noticed an old man sitting on a low stool, surrounded by children. The man's eyes were clouded with blindness, but his voice was clear and strong. He was telling a story about a hunter who chased happiness into the forest, only to find it living inside his own heart. The children listened with open mouths, gasping and laughing at all the right moments. Curious, the disguised chief drew closer and sat quietly at the back of the circle. When the story ended, the children clapped and some dropped small coins into a calabash beside the old man. As they drifted away, the chief remained seated. "Baba," he said softly, "your stories are very powerful." The old man smiled, turning his face in the direction of the voice. "Ah, a new listener," he replied. "Sit closer, friend." Chief Adewale moved nearer, humbled by the invitation. They began to talk. The storyteller, who called himself Baba Alorin, explained that he used to be a farmer until age and illness took his sight. "But when my eyes closed," he said, tapping his chest, "this eye opened." He spoke of the eye of the heart, the place where true vision lives. "Wealth is not evil," Baba Alorin said, "but when it builds a wall between a man and other people, it becomes a prison. Laughter, friendship, shared struggles, those are the keys that open the heart's door." The chief felt as if the old man were describing his life exactly, though he had no idea he was speaking to Ilé-Oro's richest man. Days turned into weeks, and the wealthy beggar became a familiar figure in certain corners of Ilé-Oro. Some people gave him food, others offered coins or simply a kind word. Yet not everyone was kind. One hot afternoon, he sat near a road where traders passed to reach the market. Suddenly, he heard the clatter of hooves and the shouts of palace guards. A carriage approached, the very one used to carry Chief Adewale when he traveled in state. Inside, hidden behind curtains, rode the steward who now managed many affairs while the chief was away. The guards, clearing the road, shouted at people to move aside. One of the guards saw the disguised chief sitting too close to the path and barked, "You dirty beggar, move before you bring bad luck to the chief's road." Before Adewale could stand, the guard struck him sharply with the flat side of his spear. Pain shot through the chief's shoulder, and he fell sideways, his calabash rolling into the dust. The carriage passed without slowing. People nearby hissed and muttered at the guard's cruelty, but no one dared challenge palace soldiers. Lying on the ground, the chief felt more than physical pain. Shame burned in his chest. "So this is how my power feels on the other side," he thought. "My wealth, my guards, my name, do they bring fear instead of comfort?" A young man hurried over, helped him sit, and dusted off his clothes. "Don't mind them, Baba," the stranger said gently. "Some people forget that we are all made from the same clay." Chief Adewale lowered his head, realizing how his own greatness had cast shadows he had never seen from his balcony. Not long after the incident with the guard, the chief's body, unused to rough sleeping and scavenged food, began to protest. He developed a cough that rattled his chest and a fever that made the world swim before his eyes. One rainy night, shivering and soaked, he collapsed near the broken door compound where the kind family lived. The little boy, now his friend, found him there while running an errand. "Mama, Mama," the boy cried. "The old man is dying." They carried the chief inside, laying him on a thin mat near their smoky fire. For days, he drifted in and out of sleep as the family cared for him. The mother boiled herbs, wiped his forehead, and forced him to sip bitter medicine. The children took turns fanning him and telling him silly stories to keep his spirit awake. They did not know his name, his past, or his secrets. All they knew was that an old beggar who often smiled at them now lay helpless in their home. "We cannot throw away a human being," the mother said, when a neighbor asked why she bothered. "If we turn our backs on him today, who will turn their face toward us when trouble comes?" Hearing this, even in his feverish state, Chief Adewale's heart swelled. He had built clinics and wells, but how many times had he himself lifted a sick stranger from the dust? Their compassion, given freely and without calculation, healed more than his body. It began to mend the cracked places in his soul. While the chief lay recovering in the poor family's compound, the palace buzzed with worry. At first, the servants assumed Chief Adewale had gone on a private journey. He was known to travel occasionally to attend to faraway businesses. But as days turned into weeks with no message, whispers grew. Baba Tund, who alone knew that his master had been behaving strangely thoughtful, grew restless. The steward, now enjoying the taste of power, gave orders in the chief's name and assured everyone that all was well. Yet at night, he too stared at the chief's empty chair and felt unease. Rumors began to swirl in Ilé-Oro. Some said the chief had traveled to another kingdom, others claimed he had died and the palace was hiding it. A few muttered that perhaps the gods had taken him because of his wealth. In the marketplace, Mama Enkem argued with another seller. "That man cannot just disappear," she insisted. "Rich people do not vanish like smoke, they leave footprints." But no one had seen him, not in chariots, not in markets, not in shrines. All the while, the rich man they discussed lay in a simple room with a leaking roof, listening to raindrops drum a lullaby above his head. For the first time, he tasted what it meant to be uncounted, unreported, and yet deeply cared for by those who owed him nothing. As his strength returned, Chief Adewale found himself caught between two worlds. In the mornings, he sat outside the broken door compound, sharing roasted corn with the children and trading jokes with neighbors. In the evenings, he walked through the narrow alleys, greeting people who now recognized him as Baba Ajani, the gentle old beggar. He had learned their stories. The woman who sold oranges to pay her daughter's school fees, the young man who dreamed of buying a single sewing machine to start a business, the old grandmother who watched other people's children for a few coins. Their lives were full of struggle, but also full of dreams, songs, and shared burdens. Yet at night, when he lay on the thin mat, he could not entirely forget the palace. He knew that behind those walls, servants still waited, businesses still needed decisions, and his wealth still slept in locked rooms. "Can I abandon all that?" he asked himself. "If I return, can I truly be the same man?" The more he thought, the clearer one thing became. He could never again sit in his high balcony, looking down at his people like distant dolls. He had walked their roads, eaten their simple food, and received their kindness. Their laughter had entered his bones, and so he stood at a crossroads only he could see. One road led back to comfort without connection. The other led to a new life whose shape he did not yet fully understand. But he knew this. Whatever he chose, he would never again be rich in coins but poor in heart. One afternoon, after many sleepless nights of thinking, Chief Adewale asked the kind family to gather in their small courtyard. The children sat cross-legged, curious. The mother wiped her hands and leaned against the wall. A few neighbors peered over the broken door, wondering what the quiet old beggar wanted. His heart thumped in his chest like a talking drum. "My friends," he began, voice trembling, "there is something I must tell you. I have not been honest about who I am." The mother frowned slightly, worried he might confess to some crime. "Who are you truly, Baba?" she asked. The old man straightened his back and removed the ragged cap from his head. "My name is Adewale Ajani," he said slowly, "and I am the chief of Ilé-Oro." For a moment, silence swallowed the compound. Then the children burst into laughter, thinking it was a joke. "Our Baba, the chief," one giggled. "Next, you will say the goat is the king of lions." But the mother did not laugh. She stared at his face, really looking for the first time. Beneath the ash and wrinkles of hardship, she saw the noble shape of his features, the careful way he spoke. Her eyes widened. "It cannot be," she whispered. He reached into his tattered wrapper and brought out a small gold pendant he had secretly kept, engraved with the royal symbol of Ilé-Oro. Gasps filled the air. Neighbors pushed the broken door fully open, knocking it off its hinges. "The chief in our house?" someone breathed. Chief Adewale bowed his head. "Yes. And if not for you, I might have died on your doorstep." Once the truth settled on them like dust after a storm, reactions came in waves. Some neighbors dropped to their knees immediately, babbling apologies for speaking casually in front of him all those days. Others hid behind walls, ashamed of times they had ignored or scolded him. The children, eyes bright with wonder, circled him as if he had turned into a masquerade. "So you are truly a chief?" the smallest one asked. "Then why were you begging?" Chief Adewale smiled gently. "Because I wanted to know how my people live when I am not looking from my balcony. I wanted to see with my own eyes and feel with my own skin." The mother, hands trembling, tried to return every coin he had ever been given, but he stopped her. "No," he said firmly. "What you gave me were not coins. You gave me care, food, warmth, and laughter. Those cannot be returned, they must be honored." Mama Enkem, hearing the news, came rushing from the market, still clutching her pepper basket. "So all this time," she exclaimed, half angry, half amazed, "I was calling the chief old man and teasing him about pepper." The crowd murmured nervously. Chief Adewale laughed for the first time in a long while, real laughter that shook his shoulders. "And you taught me something more valuable than gold," he replied. "You taught me that money does not buy joy, and now I believe it with all my heart." The people saw his eyes shining not with power, but with humility, and something shifted between them. He was still their chief, but now he was also their companion in suffering and in laughter. Word spread like harmattan fire. The chief had been living among the poor as a beggar. By the time Adewale walked back toward his compound, still wearing his tattered clothes but now surrounded by villagers, the palace gates were crowded with curious faces and anxious servants. Baba Tund ran forward, tears streaming down his cheeks. "My master," he cried. "We thought the earth had swallowed you." The steward, pale and sweating, bowed so low his forehead almost kissed the ground. "My chief," he stammered, "I always knew you would return." The chief looked at him calmly, seeing the fear behind the man's eyes. Inside the palace, he refused to change his clothes at once. Instead, he walked through every room, seeing them now with new eyes. The treasure room, piled with gold and jewels, felt strangely cold. The grand dining hall seemed too large for one man's hunger. The silence of the inner courtyard pressed on his ears. "All this," he thought, "and yet my heart found more warmth in a leaking house with a broken door." He called his council together and told them the story of his journey. Some were shocked, some offended, some secretly relieved that their positions were secure again. But he raised his hand for silence. "From this day forward," he declared, "my wealth will not only build roads and wells, it will build bridges between our hearts. I have seen how my people live. I will not pretend blindness again." His voice carried a strength that came not from authority, but from experience. To show that his words were not just wind, Chief Adewale planned a feast unlike any Ilé-Oro had seen before. He called it the Feast of the Shared Pot. Instead of inviting only chiefs, rich traders, and important visitors, he sent messengers to every part of town, to the Broken Door compound, to the market stalls, to the streets where children played barefoot. "Everyone is welcome," the message said. "Come and eat at the chief's table." On the chosen day, the palace gates were thrown wide open. Long mats were spread in the courtyard, not just chairs at high tables. Huge pots of jollof rice, yam pottage, vegetable soup, and roasted meat steamed in the center of the yard. But instead of servants carrying plates to guests, the chief himself, still wearing a simple woven cloth instead of jeweled robes, took a ladle and began serving. Children stared in shock as the richest man in Ilé-Oro scooped food into their bowls with his own hands. "Eat, my young friends," he said. "You once shared your laughter with a stranger. Today I share my riches with you." Mama Enkem found herself sitting next to a wealthy trader she once feared to approach. The blind storyteller, Baba Alorin, sat near the council members, his staff resting beside him. Between bites of food, people began to talk, really talk to one another, not as rich and poor, but as neighbors. For the first time, the chief's compound echoed with the same kind of warm, rough laughter he had heard in the streets. He felt a deep peace settle inside him, richer than any gold. Despite the changes in the palace, Chief Adewale knew that true transformation required more than one feast. One morning, he shocked his council by announcing a new decision. "I will no longer sleep only within these high walls," he said. "I am building a small house in the quarter where the poor live, near the Broken Door compound. I will live between the two worlds, palace and street, so my heart never forgets." Some council members protested. "But my chief, it is not safe." "It is not fitting for one of your status," he smiled calmly. "If it was safe enough for me as a beggar, it is safe enough for me as a chief." True to his word, he built a modest home, nothing more than a few rooms with a solid roof and a small courtyard. He did not decorate it with gold or marble. Instead, he filled it with woven mats from local artisans, clay pots from village potters, and benches made by young carpenters seeking work. Many evenings, he stayed there, sitting outside to chat with neighbors, listening to their worries and ideas. Sometimes he joined them in eating simple meals, cooked over open fires. Children ran in and out freely, no guards blocking their way. They still called him Baba Wura, but now the name carried affection rather than distance. In that house, he felt lighter. The palace remained a place of duty, but this humble home became a place of genuine belonging. As one old woman said, "Our chief has not come down to our level. He has discovered that we were all on the same ground all along." Of course, not everything became perfect overnight. As people realized how generous and approachable the chief now was, some tried to take advantage. Certain traders exaggerated their problems to gain extra money. A few lazy men stopped working, hoping that the chief's new kindness meant he would feed them forever. Even among his neighbors in the poor quarter, whispers began. "If we flatter him, he will favor us." The same mask of false laughter he had once worn began to appear on other faces. Chief Adewale watched this with a heavy heart. Had his attempt to share life with the poor only created new forms of dishonesty? One evening, he went to sit with Baba Olorin under the mango tree. He poured out his worries, confessing that people were now pretending in a new way. The blind storyteller chuckled softly. "My son," he said, "a man who plants a tree cannot complain that birds come to nest. Good and bad will always be attracted to wealth and power. The question is, will you let their behavior change your heart, or will you continue to act from the truth you have learned?" He advised the chief to combine kindness with wisdom. "Help people to stand," he said, "not just to stretch out their hands. Build schools, not just soup lines. Create work, not just wells." The chief nodded, his mind clearing. He realized that real love sometimes meant saying no as well as yes, guiding people toward dignity, not dependence. From then on, he designed programs that offered training and tools, not just gifts. Those who truly wanted to improve their lives embraced the opportunity. Those who wanted only easy favors drifted away. Years passed, and the story of Chief Adewale's journey from balcony to street spread far beyond Ilé-Oro. Travelers carried the tale to other towns, adding their own spices, as storytellers do. Some said he had lived for a whole year as a beggar. Others claimed he had given away nearly all his wealth. Children in distant villages played games where one pretended to be the wealthy beggar chief, sneaking around in rags to test their friend's kindness. In Ilé-Oro itself, people began to measure themselves against the story. When someone turned away a person in need, another would say, "Have you forgotten our chief once lay in the dust?" And shame would soften their hearts. Chief Adewale grew older, his hair turning white like the foam on a restless river. Yet his eyes remained bright, filled with the reflections of all he had seen. He still divided his time between the palace and his modest house in the poor quarter, though his steps grew slower. Often he would sit with the children of those who had once helped him, telling them the story of his own foolishness and awakening. "I was rich," he would say, "but poverty lived in my heart. Then you taught me how to be truly wealthy." The children would giggle at the idea of a chief in rags, but they listened. Slowly, a new understanding of wealth took root in Ilé-Oro. Wealth was not just land, cows, and coins. It was also friends, laughter, shared meals, and a heart that knew how to give and receive. On a calm night many seasons later, under a sky pricked with stars, Baba Olorin, or another storyteller like him, sat beneath the same mango tree where the chief had once come as a beggar. Around him, children gathered in a noisy circle, each clutching a piece of roasted corn or groundnuts. "Tonight," the storyteller announced, "I will tell you about the wealthy beggar." The children leaned forward. Some had heard the tale before, but no one ever tired of it. The storyteller spoke of the lonely rich man in his high compound, of the wild idea to wear rags, of the bruises on the road, the kindness of a poor family, and the laughter that healed a broken heart. As the story unfolded, the children reacted with gasps and giggles, anger at the cruel guard, admiration for the caring mother, surprise at the great revelation. When the tale reached the part where the chief chose to live among the poor, a little girl raised her hand. "Baba," she asked, "was he foolish to leave his comfort?" The old man smiled. "My child," he replied, "a man who leaves an empty house to live in a full heart is not foolish. He has simply become wise." Then he ended with a proverb that had grown from the chief's life. "The man who shares his mat sleeps softer than the man who guards his gold." The fire crackled. The children gazed up at the stars, and somewhere in the night, carried on a gentle breeze, it almost seemed as if a rich man and a beggar laughed together in the same voice.